That's Kev.
Okay, so just a dedication for a first name for my friend Anna from London. Her dad hasn't been well. Eliezer Tzvi ben Rivka
Amen.
and other Cholim of Klal Yisrael.
Amen.
Okay, so continuing with the theme of Chilul Hashem, the Rambam in Yesodei HaTorah rules that one does not have to actually commit a sin in order to desecrate Hashem's name. The greater and more famous a person is, the greater is his responsibility to be careful in all aspects of his behavior. There are other things that are also considered Chilul Hashem, things done by a man who is great in Torah and famous for his piety. If he does things that people gossip about, even though they are not sins, he is caused a Chilul Hashem. If his speech with others is not congenial, and he does not greet them nicely, he's quarrelsome and prone to anger, etc. All this depends on the greatness of the sage. He must be meticulous and go beyond the letter of the law. Similarly, if he's meticulous in his behavior, speaks congenially and gets along with others, maintains a refined demeanor, greeting them with a pleasant countenance, and does not respond in kind when insulted, even to those who ridicule him, and conducts his business with integrity, to the point where everyone praises and loves him and values his actions. Behold, this individual sanctified the name of Hashem. And lastly, it says in Yeshayahu, chapter 49, verse 3, it says, "You are my servant Israel. Through you I will be glorified." Okay. I think it sounds like common sense, but common sense doesn't always apply.
Right, it's a superpower today, common in a sense, and common courtesy. It's a superpower. Seriously, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's unbelievable. All right, so I'll tell you where we were talking about that enactment of Usha, which was one of the 10 places where the Sanhedrin convened, gave the husband extra power so that there wouldn't be any anonymity between him and his wife, where she basically could leave the property or gift it or sell it. So in other words, it was different to a father and a son, or a son and a father. It was a different case as far as the marriage is concerned. Now, what we want to know is some of the implications of this enactment of Usha. So, Rav, look, before I go with Rav Idi Baravin, I want to just explain to you this upcoming Gemara. And I want to review some of the laws pertaining to the financial relationship between a husband and wife, and this is going to prove helpful. So, guys, if you concentrate on these next few minutes, the rest will be easy. So, when a couple marries, the husband is required to write his wife a ketubah contract. And he promises, among other things, that in the event of his death or their divorce, he, in the case of his divorce, or his estate in the case of his death, will pay her 200 zuz if she's a virgin at the time of their marriage, or 100 zuz if she was a non-virgin. Now, you might say, well, why would he marry a non-virgin? It's possible this is his second marriage. He may also elect, at the request of his bride, or maybe of his own volition, to add to these minimum amounts, in which case the additional amount is added to the statutory amount. So again, the statutory amount is 200 zuz if she's a virgin, 100 zuz if she's a non-virgin, but you can add to that amount. And so your basic statutory amount is known as a Ikar Ketubah, the actual essence of it, right? Then you've got Tosefet Ketubah, which is a supplementary Ketubah. That's when the husband is absolutely head over heels in love with his wife. And at that point, before he really gets to know her, he puts down in writing that he gives her a lot more than he would have had he got to know her very well. So that's what you call the additional amount. Now, in addition to the above, the woman can even ask to have all or some of the property she brings in the marriage appraised and its value fixed for her at the time of her marriage. Okay, so what happens is that it's recorded and added to her ketubah. Okay, because he's got to get a certain amount of benefits, right? But that amount is fixed. In other words, they do a current evaluation. And when she brings that in the marriage, in the event that he divorces her or she becomes widowed, she receives, in addition to the basic and supplementary amounts, that appraised value of the property that she bought in the marriage that comes back to her. But it doesn't matter regardless of the actual value of the property at the time of the death or divorce. It's actually fixed. So if it goes up in value, the husband scores, and if it goes down in value, she scores. Okay, why is it set at that particular time? Well, you can understand that it might affect things quite a lot, because if you see how property does escalate, it could bankrupt the estate, and then the children of a previous marriage might not be left with that much, because at the end of the day, all we're looking to do is give her back what she invested in the property. And we consider the interest to be the benefit that the husband received, like almost like produce. And if there's a loss, he takes the hit, as long as she gets paid what's fair. Okay, now that particular amount, if you look at the basic amount, which is the Ikka Ketubah, basic amount is the statutory amount by law. The supplementary Ketubah, the Tosefet Ketubah, that's whatever else he puts in the marriage over and above that amount by law, because he's absolutely head over heels in love. So those two aspects, plus the property that she brings in, that's recorded as the Tzon Barzel value. So, Kevin, do you know what the Tzon Barzel value is? Well, do you know what the word Tzon Barzel means?
Barzel is iron.
Correct.
Tzon or tzom?
Tzon.
Tzadi Vav Nun. So I know Barzel is iron.
Yes.
I don't know what tzon means.
Barzel means iron sheep. What it means is that basically is set in stone or in writing. Okay, and that's referred to as the ketubah. So it's the property she brings in the marriage, the property that if they get divorced, he pays her back exactly what it was worth at the time they got married. If he dies, the estate pays it back to her, and as well as the 200 or 100 zuz of the statutory basic amount, as well as any supplementary amounts. Okay, now that is the ketubah, but there is property that's not registered in the ketubah. In other words, all other property of a married woman can be brought into the marriage and not to be recorded in the ketubah. Okay, so in other words, it's unofficial property. One of them would be malok property, for example. So malok property could be defined as a few things. It's property that she acquired after marriage by either an inheritance from a relative or maybe through a gift, as well as property that wasn't officially written into the marriage contract, where the husband had certain rights to, had they stayed married and she died before him. Now, in that particular case, the husband owns the right to use that property to get the usufruct or the produce, and therefore keeping whatever income it yields for the duration of the marriage. Now, how does that work? Because we said with this case, why didn't her son get the actual amount for the malok? Because at the end of the day, it wasn't recorded in the ketubah. And we said that one of the reasons is the case wasn't analogous to the father and son, at which case, if it was analogous to that case in the brisa, the son would be gifted it, because we learned that there was Rav Yochanan and there was Reish Lakish. And Reish Lakish says that the title deed is what contains the power of who controls the property, whereas Rav Yochanan said it's the owner of the usufruct and produce, because according to his thinking, if it's not doing anything constructive with the land, well, what point is it? You get what I'm saying? But in these cases, this is one of 3 cases in the Gemara where we go according to Reish Lakish. But that enactment of Ula is pretty strong, because what we said is there could be a case with a father and a son where the son has got his own children. Say the son's got his own son, but that son's a nasty drug addict that that is going to go through the money in 2 minutes. In that case, he would sign over the property to his father to make sure his son didn't get it. His son might get a monthly stipend if he landed up in what do you call it, in therapy or in rehab or something like that. But he couldn't figure that as an addict he wouldn't snort up half that estate unless he got the help he needed. So then it would be sent to the father. Now, what happens if the father sold the property, even though that wasn't the son's intent? Because clearly it wasn't the son's intent. The father's going to die before his son. Well, then, unfortunately, the father can do that even against the son's will, because the title deed controls the property. But it's a limited conditional sale where the usufruct, the produce, still goes to the son. But the full benefit of the sale only goes when both parties either agree or the owner of the produce dies, whether it's the son or the father. It could be that the son's terminally ill. We don't know. The other case where the father leaves the son, well, what's that about? Maybe he's got many children, he said. Maybe he doesn't like these other children. So he leaves it to the son. But again, he might not leave it to his son and approve of his son selling it, because he left it to his son because the son's brother's a drug addict. So he says, listen, look after your brother when I go to the birdies in the sky, and make sure he gets his monthly stipend. But he didn't expect the other son to be a thief and sell it under his nose. The one's a drug addict and the one's a thief. Very proud father. So he can't do anything about it technically because his son is the title deed. So we're saying that at the end of the day, Reish Lakish is right. But it's not the case here with the Malok property. It's not analogous. That was the problem because of this enactment of Usha. So how does this enactment of Usha actually play itself out? Because now that you understand how the ketubah works, Rav Ida Bar Ravin said we learned of the enactment of Usha in a brisa, okay? And if witnesses said, we testify about this and this person, that he divorced his wife and gave her ketubah, okay? And if in fact she's living with him and serving him, and they were found to be zomamim, we do not say that they should pay her entire ketubah, but rather the discounted amount of her ketubah. And what is the discounted amount of her ketubah? We assess how much a person would be willing to pay on speculation for the rights to this woman's ketubah, on the chance that if she should be widowed or divorced, the buyer would collect it, while if she should die before her husband, the husband would inherit her and the buyer would receive nothing. So let me just unpack this brisa for you. There's various factors. This woman gets taken to court, and these witnesses come against her and said, listen, you're living in sin. Well, you're not living in sin. You're actually divorced, by the way, because we saw your husband issue you with the divorce and pay you your ketubah. So, you're kind of either living with him in sin or you're conning the rest of the world. Now, at that point, it's fine because they need evidence. Now, what happens if a second group of witnesses come and say, you couldn't have seen her husband issue her the bill of divorce in Johannesburg because you were with us in Cape Town on holiday. We saw you at the movies. So in that case, they're made to be Eidim Zomamim. So we say, what is the rule of Eidim Zomamim? What they intended to do to the defendant that was innocent, because they were conspiring and lying, is done to them. So what did they intend to do to this woman? To deprive her of her ketubah, where the husband would pay in the event of divorce or death. So the question arises, well, if that's the case, Why don't we make her pay? Why don't we make the Eidim Zumimim pay her the full value of the ketubah? Because at the end of the day, they sought to deprive her of her whole ketubah. But they're not paying the value of her whole ketubah. What are they paying her, guys? They're paying her the amount of what she would get for her discounted amount of her ketubah. So what's this case? The woman needs the money, right, for whatever reason. So she says, she goes to a buyer. She says, listen, I've got wonderful gambling odds with you. What happens is that he buys it at a very discounted rate because it could work out for him on speculation or it could not work out for him. If she got divorced or her husband died, okay, the buyer would collect her ketubah instead of her. But if she would die before her husband would inherit the property and she would receive nothing. So you might ask yourself, before we find out why the Eidim Zomim would be paid not the full amount of the ketubah, you've got to ask yourself, why would the buyer do such a thing? Okay, because the truth of it is it could be a losing deal. She could have a great marriage and she could be as healthy as anything. Then he's got a bit of a problem. In other words, well, should we say it like this? No. He's as healthy as anything, and their marriage is good. So, in other words, she's going to outlive him, and they're going to stay married. So, why would a buyer accept those sort of odds? Because they're gambling odds. Granted, he's paying a much smaller amount. Why do you think, guys, he'd pay those odds? Why do you think he'd do it?
Well, he's picking it up cheaper. I mean, he's picking it up at probably like half the amount, half the value of what the normal price is. But I wanted to ask you something also. Sorry, I wanted to ask you something. How can she be allowed to what's it called? Give over her ketubah as surety or security, whatever, without the husband's consent? I mean, it just sounds quite reckless.
Firstly, I think that's a great question. I think that's a great question because this is exactly what's going to come up you like a mind reader, Gavin. Because the reason this is coming back up is because Rabbi Yochanan doesn't see this enactment of Usha. Okay? Because he said the husband, as controlling of the produce, the usufruct, is in control of her property. It's only if you hold by Reish Lakish that we say the only reason the son isn't gifted the property is this enactment of Usha. And what Gavin is saying is, why is the enactment of Usha set up? It's set up in order that the husband doesn't have enmity against the wife. He's not angry with her because she's now gifted it to the son. Do you get what I'm saying? So in other words, it's a good reason to think that it would create marital strife if ever he found out. So if there is this whole enactment of Usha, which means in a marriage, she's coming to the marriage and saying to him, I'm going to give you this. And it turns out that while she's alive, the new husband realizes she gifted it to the son or sold it to somebody else. That would make him very angry. And that's the whole point of the enactment of Usha. So Gavin's asking, why would such a thing be allowed if there's an enactment of Usha that she could sell him, she could sell a ketubah while still married? That would really upset him. Is that what you're asking, Gavin?
Yeah, 100%. And also, it's not fair to him because you said that if she dies before him, he inherits everything, and I guess he's not. So he stands to lose a fortune here as well.
Correct. There is an issue as far as that's concerned. Correct. So we're going to look at two aspects here in the upcoming Gemara. If there's no enactment of Usha, whether it's fair or not, it's up to her. In other words, if there's a rabbinical enactment to create peace between a wife and a husband, then we understand why she can't do it. If the rabbis turn around and say, guys, it's your marriage, short of killing each other, it's up to you. If it's that particular case, whether it's fair or not, it might not have governmental or halachic interference. So in other words, corporate governance is when government gets involved with how people pay taxes, how corporations are run. Do you protect the consumer? Do you protect the company? Can you protect imports? In other words, certain things the government can meddle with, and certain things they give it up to the population. You get what I'm saying? Same thing halachically or by a law system. So you've got two choices, Gavin. The one is that there's no enactment of Usha, where the husband and wife say, you know what, you want to kill each other and get divorced or whatever, that's your business. Sort it out amongst yourselves. It could be that a husband could be a gambler and get rid of all their assets. A wife can't do anything, whether it's fair or not. Or he marries somebody else, or marries somebody in addition to his wife, or she could blow them. You know what I'm saying? So we're saying the only way that he can be protected is this enactment of Usha. And while this whole case is coming up, is it saying, well, was there an enactment of Usha? Because according to Rav Idi Bar Avin, he's coming to say there is an enactment of Usha, because if there wasn't, she could sell it to the buyer at a discounted rate. So say she's really ticked off with the husband. She's not going to get as much as half, Gavin, because nobody in the right mind is going to pay half on a low probability bet. She might get 10%. She might get 20%, but certainly not half. So you get what I'm saying? That's for sure not. The odds aren't in her favor. The odds are not in the buyer's favor. Because even if they're having an argument, if they kiss and make up, the buyer's sitting with the problem. Because as long as he's alive, the husband, and as long as their marriage is intact, he's not getting anything. He's wasted his money. And it could be that the husband and wife needed money, decided to get together and con some sort of buyer. Did you ever think of that?
Very clever, absolutely. No, yeah. I can see it now.
So what they do is they have this big argument in public. You bet you this, you that, or whatever. I'm divorcing you, you two-timer, whatever. And then they make a stink because they need money urgently. And she said, listen, I've got to get out of this relationship. And don't worry about my husband beating you up. He's Woody Allen. He's 5'4" and a skinny rake. I'd smack him to pieces if I could. So the buyer's not worried because he's a 6'4" breaker. He's not worried about this Woody Allen character nerd. It's one thing, you don't become the buyer of this situation if the husband's been working out 6 times in the gym and he's got anger issues. But if the husband's innocuous and a harmless oak, and you figure their marriage is pretty unstable, you figure, why not take a chance? I could inherit a couple of million rand. I'm only going to cost me 20 grand, especially if you hear their marriage is on the rocks. But you don't know if the husband and wife has set this up privately. I'm just saying. So what we're saying is, can you do such a thing, Kevin? Because if this enactment of Usha means she can't. But we're going to get to that. You just need to have a little bit of patience. I need to explain to you about these Adam Zimmerman first. Okay. So as far as these Adam Zimmerman, why don't we get them to pay the full amount that they sought to deprive her of? Does anybody know Arthur's done Chazorah?
What's the question again, please?
Okay, so what happens is there are 2 witnesses that said that this woman isn't married. Not only is she not married, she's living in sin with a guy, and he's paid her the ketubah out. And now that she's got the money, she's still like with him and not really with him. And listen, he's paid her out. Now she's they wanted on record that she's not entitled to the ketubah at all. She's been paid out and they're divorced, even though they look married. Now, there's another set of witnesses, Kevin, another set, and you come down and you say, listen, these witnesses couldn't have seen them, the husband giving the wife the bill of divorce, because you saw them in Renana. You and Arthur saw them in Renana on holiday. So therefore, they proved to be conspiring witnesses. So then what do we do with conspiring witnesses, Kevin?
Okay, in this case.
No. In any case, what's the rule?
They make restitution on the allegations that they need to. That's the punishment. They need to pay someone what they accuse someone of. They need to, if it's monetary, they need to pay that amount. So
So exactly as you said in Deuteronomy, Devarim chapter 19, verse 19, the law is that the second pair of witnesses are actually believed. That's a chiddush, by the way. And the first pair, who are termed conspirators, are punished with the same punishment that they had attempted to impose upon their victim. In the present case, the witnesses would have caused her to not be able to collect a ketubah in the event that she were to become divorced or widowed. So their punishment should be to pay the same amount of money that they would have caused her to lose. That's the rules of Adam Zomamim. Why, in this case, do they only pay the amount that a buyer would have paid, which was like a tenth, in order to take this, what do you call it, speculation risk on the fact that he gets the full estate upon her husband's death or her divorce? Why are they paying less? So that's what we got to examine here. Arthur, do you remember?
Yes.
Why?
Isn't it because that I remember he said there was a specific word for it. I can't remember the word. But because the value of the paper, it's only written on a piece of paper. It's only worth so let's say it was 100, it would be only worth 10. Okay, and I can't remember the word. Listen to my three. Is the word he used, and I cannot remember the word. It was like a phrase. He said it was a specific phrase. I can't blank.
Okay,
I remember that's.
You're right.
You mentioned
you're right in one perspective. We're not saying that. We're saying, yes, the buyer pays like 10%, because when you're speculating on an investment that could or could not pay off, it's like the lotto. So in other words, on the chance that he wins and they get divorced or the husband dies, he gets it. But it's a small probability, so he'll pay like a 10. That's not the question. The question is, why do the Adam Zomamim only pay that reduced value and not her the value of her full ketubah? Because that's what they sought to deprive from her. That's a different question.
Because she didn't actually lose anything because she actually wasn't divorced.
Exactly. Arthur gets 10 out of 10. He's dead Rabbi Cohen. So the fact of it is, that's exactly it. Had she definitely been divorced, as per the testimony of another pair of witnesses, and the Zomamim's false testimony was only that she had already received a ketubah, when in fact she did not, the Zomamim would have to pay the entire value of the ketubah, because that's what their testimony would have caused her to lose. Because in other words, she actually did get divorced. They only testified that he paid her out the ketubah. Then they sought to extract from her the full value of her ketubah. The reason but in the present case, the woman was truthfully still married to her husband, which leaves open the possibility that she will, in any case, never attain the right to collect her ketubah. In other words, she might never be divorced, and she might predecease her husband, right? So if this were to happen, it would emerge that the witnesses didn't actually cause the woman any financial loss. So we cannot require them to pay the full value of her ketubah, according to Rashi. Rather, they pay the discounted amount of her ketubah.
And what happens if these witnesses, through their actions, lead to this couple getting divorced?
It can't. It can't, because whatever happens afterwards is not what they sought to do. Again, Adam Zomamim is only the case of what's happening in the present court case.
Yeah.
And if anything, he might testify that they're not divorced, because it's seen through witnesses that he would bring, especially if he loves her, he would say, he would say, we're still married. Otherwise, they would have a very difficult time. He's not upset with her. He's upset with the witnesses. Okay? So a married woman has the ability to sell a ketubah with a stipulation that if she's widowed or divorced, the buyer will collect the entire face value of the ketubah, which is the statutory 1 or 200 zuz together with any supplementary amount, plus the value of the tzun basal property. But if she dies during her husband's lifetime, Gavin, he will receive nothing, the buyer, because the husband will not be obligated to pay her the ketubah settlement, and he will inherit her tzun basal property. So since the buyer takes a significant risk in making such a purchase, the price he pays is steeply discounted from the face value of the ketubah. if the
You know,
discounted amount that the Zimmerman must pay her, just hang on a sec, because their testimony had been accepted, she would have immediately lost that only smaller ability to receive that amount from the buyer. That's all. But I just want to finish this concept, Gav. We've got 6 minutes left. I just want to hold off questions for a few minutes. So, why are we bringing up this whole case? Because Rav Idi Bar Avid concludes. Guys?
Damon, we can't hear you, eh?
You have to go back 30 seconds, eh?
Okay.
You've got to go back about a minute.
Okay.
For about a minute.
Can you hear me now, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let me just get to this point that Gavin made early on. Rav Ili Bar Ravin concludes his proof. And if it should enter your mind that there is no enactment of Usha, why does the Brisa state that her husband would inherit her? Let her sell her ketubah completely, even on the eventuality that she dies first. In other words, true, the husband won't have to pay the 100 or 200 zuz if she dies first, because that's amount of her either being a virgin or not. That's the amount he pays her. It's nothing to do with the property she brought in the marriage. Okay, so that would explain why the ketubah is discounted on that account. But why does the Brisa state that the ketubah is discounted? Because if she dies first, the husband would inherit her, which refers to the Tzon Bazel property. In other words, property that she brought in the marriage that is recorded. Because the basic and supplementary ketubah amounts are not inherited by the husband if she dies first. That's simply obligations that he doesn't have to pay. So if there's no such thing as the enactment of Usha, the wife should be able to sell the Tzon Basel property completely, even in the event that she dies first. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's almost a proof that there is an enactment of Usha. Because otherwise, that she'd be able to sell it. He can have no control over it. Do you get what I'm saying? In other words, she wouldn't have to discount it, Gavin. In other words, she would get the full value of the Bad Son property.
Yes, I understand that.
The fact that she's getting a discounted amount means she's only got permission if he dies first or they get divorced. But while they're married, she can't have control over it, which is why that proves there's an enactment of Usha. Do you get what I'm saying? So let me just finish, guys. Let me give me a minute, please. Give me a minute. So the Gemara rejects the proof. A buyer says if they stated in regard to Malog property that her sale is valid, did they not say the same in regard to the Tzon Bazel property? So what it means is as follows, Gavin, is that even if there's no such thing as the enactment of Usha, listen carefully, it would mean only that she could sell her Malog property even if she died first, because that wasn't recorded in the Ketubah, and she inherited that after she was married. It just means that the essence of the property is hers because she owns the title deed. The husband gets the user right. Okay? And if that property either increases or decreases in value, it would be her gain or loss. But she can't sell, even without the special enactment of Usha, the Tzon Bazel property. Okay? Because such property is essentially the husband's. It's not like she inherited it after the marriage or was gifted it. So, in other words, how do we know that? Because whether that property appreciates or depreciates in the event of the divorce or death, she only gets the initial value of what she brought it into the marriage at that value. That's why it's called the iron sheep, because it endures for a woman like iron. So the husband guarantees at the time of the marriage that regardless of consumption, loss of price fluctuation, she will always receive the original value of that property back in the event of his death or their divorce. So since the woman can't sell the Tzon Bazel portion of the property in the ketubah if she dies first, the Zimmerman witnesses would need to compensate her only for the discounted value of that property. So nothing can be derived about the Malog property from the enactment of Usha. In other words, in his proof, Rav Idi Bar Ravin assumed that there was no enactment of Usha disallowing her sale of the Malog property if she died first. Then her sale of the Tzon Bazel property if she died first would also be valid, and a buyer doesn't agree. He said the two are different issues. All right, you can ask a question. I just needed to explain it to you.
Then I just wanted to understand. Just bottom line. Can she or can't she discount her ketubah? Can she or she's not allowed to?
So she can, and that proves that that's improving that there's an enactment of Usha, because she wouldn't have to discount the property if there was no enactment in Usha. Why? Because it's her property. She could just sell it outright. In other words, the husband could still get the produce, and she could sell the property on a conditional sale. And in the event of the husband getting, she wouldn't have to get a discounted amount on the fact that he divorced her or he died. She could just sell it. It's not part of the ketubah, the malok property. We're saying that if she after getting married gets it gifted or it's not recorded in the ketubah, the husband can use the produce, but he can't control the property. The only reason why he can control it from selling it is because of this enactment of Usha, and this is a proof of the enactment of Usha. That's why she's getting a discounted amount from the buyer, because otherwise she could do with the property what she wanted. It proves it. You see?
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
All right, guys, I hope this was a good share. I went through it.